April 3rd, 2019 at 6:30 p.m. Jeff, would you like to call us to order first before we do the Pledge of Allegiance?
Oh, yes. I'll call the Advisory Committee to order.
Great. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is anybody in the audience taping? If so, please identify yourself for the record. I see nobody. We are being taped by TCTV. That will be local on Channel 8, hopefully by tomorrow or the next day, so all the residents can see how these meetings go. We'll do the presentation of the Narragansett Regional School District FY'20 budget. Dr. Kazavant is here with your staff, I would assume. Can you introduce your staff?
Well, I have Ms. Anne Marie to my right here, who's our business manager. Mm-hmm. I have Rick, who's to my right as well, and he's our facilities director. And I don't know if anyone else is coming, Anne Marie. Oh, Jeff, I didn't see you. And and we have a member of the school committee as well. So
fantastic.
So thank you for having me. I do want to apologize for not coming, I think, at the original meeting day. I was at the school committee meeting. We had a school committee the same evening, so I don't know where the cross-up was, but that's why I wasn't here that evening. In any event, what I think I know, because I've seen you all a lot, I've presented this, the presentation, at least twice to both committees, either individually or together. Mm-hmm. Quite honest, I think it's just easier if I just answer any questions. I mean, I could go over anything you want, but you've seen this presentation. Mm-hmm. I would just add that over the past 2 weeks, I think, we've had 7 community meetings. If anybody has questions, we've entertained or had at least about 40 total folks who've come in at all those different times, obviously. We've asked a lot of great questions, and we have 2 more, one tomorrow in central office at 7 o'clock, and April 24th in central office at, I think, at the same time, 7 o'clock. So yeah, so it's been excellent talking with the community about the budget. They've had a lot of great questions.
And the perception's been pretty well, as far as your
well, no,
perception.
I mean, well, the perception, it's hard to gauge perception, but
Mm-hmm.
What I can tell you is that, most of the questions, and I really have started off the same way. What questions do you have about either what you've heard, what you've seen, et cetera, with the budget? Most of the questions, of course, surround the override and what will happen. A lot of that, and after we get through that, it's generally why. So, that's been a lot of what will happen if the override doesn't happen, and procedurally, and through the 112th or whatever, through the town meeting process. And we have handouts that we give them right from the Department of Ed, and et cetera. But those are where the questions have really, that's where they've really isolated the questions of what happens if.
I see. Okay. Yes.
So you haven't really changed your budget since you met with us previously?
No.
Okay, great.
What's the total budget again, Dr. Kazavant? What was the total?
The grand total.
The grand total.
Yeah. 20 million. Yeah. 383. Yeah.
20,383,000.
Relative.
Gotcha.
Is that on any of the pages in here?
It should be right on the second page, I think. It's also on the, on the presentation that you've obviously have.
It's the second page.
Second page.
It's on the second page?
It's also on page 327 in your budget books.
Yep.
$20 million. That's the grand total of the budget. I meant the total of the override.
The override total?
Is it in the book? No, it's not. It's not here. It's not in
The
this.
override total,
We're currently looking
900.
at 988,336.
Right.
Subject, that's the school side of the house. There's some things about that we'll talk with you when we get to the ballot itself.
Okay.
But that's the current
Yes.
number.
Yes.
So I'm gonna ask the same question through you, that I ask all the time. Have the surveys come back?
Yes.
And could you give me a synopsis
The
of what they
synopsis,
said?
it was, we sent out 222 families. 148 families. There are 222 total students that fit the category of either school choiced out. We added in also homeschooled students, and we added in students who were going to a collaborative. We received 39 surveys back from the families, and overall, because the questions were very different. We asked, what did you like about Narragansett, obviously, before you left? Where were some of those things? But when you get to the heart of the matter, I believe, again, it was such a small amount of folks who answered the question, or who actually returned the survey. But I believe it was 28% said that they had better academic opportunities. And I think the other 20% were issues with either staff or administration. And so, 20% of 38, we wish we would have got, more, obviously received more surveys back. But we did receive 38 total surveys. And we sent out to the families, over 100.
Based on those surveys, are you gonna make any changes?
Well, based on the surveys, what we've done based on actually the original survey that we sent out 2 years ago to all parents about what were some of the things that they would like to see changed, and through when I was doing my entry meetings with parents, one of the things were social emotional learning / bullying was a need, improved communication, and actually offer more academic offerings. The book that you have in front of you really it's a PR book, but it is exactly the things that we're doing more of academically. And so the budget represents the social emotional, the folks needed to support the social emotional needs of the students, which we went over several times. So we did not receive any new information. I think another 12% or something that was religious reasons why they left, because either being homeschooled or they went to a Catholic private school, etc. So it was pretty varied. We wish we would have had more, come back, quite frankly.
Okay.
Great. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Great. Anyone else have any questions for Dr. Kazavant?
I just have one
Yeah,
quick
go ahead.
question, if that's okay.
Sure.
A cost of $340,000 is associated with reorganizing and opening of Templeton Center.
Yes.
Did you forget something?
How much is that?
I mean,
What was that?
I'm a little confused
Here's so.
as to
Oh, yeah.
why is that so much, why is that so high if you already pre-planned a school, had it pass with the voters? Why is that extra in your budget, is my question, I guess.
Well,
Is it like heating, is it electric, did you forget that stuff? I'm not sure.
so I went on about an hour during the
Yeah.
joint meeting. A good portion of that was exactly, focused on that. The question could be asked again. I am unsure why, if I'm to be frank, why, after 15 years to build an elementary school, no one really thought about the costs that come with just having a new building. I don't know that. We figured that out quite easily at the end of year one and began that conversation in year two. And that was the reorganization meeting that we had with the joint folks. And we went over that in depth about, when you consolidate people and you still have another elementary school, you're really not consolidating overall. You're still going to have gaps here and there. If you remember the conversation, for those of you who went through that, that's exactly what we talked about. At that point in time, we were talking about what would it look like programmatically, but we'd also talked about what it looked like financially. and we knew then that there was going to be a problem, there was going to be a deficit based on the normal day-to-day business. We talked about that quite a bit. As everyone knows, folks were very vocal about the fact that they wanted no conversation in regards to reconfiguring this district at all, in any capacity. That was clear when we had the school committee meeting. I honestly, I forget the date, but the school committee basically said, yes, we understand your concerns, and we're going to put this to rest. We're not going to discuss this any further, which is absolutely within their purview. Going forward, though, this is where we sit, because the question still is, what happens if the override does not take place? The $340,000 has salaries tied into it. No, we didn't forget about utilities or et cetera at all, but there were going to be positions needed to be added. We talked about that last year. Mm-hmm. If $1 million or so, folks, in terms of the override, I'm rounding, doesn't come to fruition, that is roughly 19 staff cuts, 5 which are being proposed, right, because of the reconfiguration or because of the budget. But if you're talking about 19 people, you're talking about consolidating the elementary schools. That means that all those Phillipston students will have to come up here to up to TC. Let's say it's 100. I don't know. That's projected. Mm-hmm. With not extra staff, you're taking those students, and I'm making this, but no, I'm not actually. If there are 20 students, say, in the 5th grade, you take those 20 students and you sprinkle them into the remaining 4 classes that you have up here at Templeton Center, increasing the class sizes. We talked about that last year. Mm-hmm. We talked about the problems of that. So no, now I don't know why I can't speak before my tenure here. I don't know. Right. But I can say that we talked about this quite early in the process last year.
Okay. Thank you.
So not only with the 340, Dr. Cosman, I mean, obviously that's not all of the new staff that was proposed. When I was going through some numbers, it looked just about, just under $700,000, which included the new staff, opening the new schools. Am I on target with that?
I don't know where you're looking, unless you've done your own math.
I did my own math.
All right, so the contract, what makes up the shortfall is $556,084
Right.
for contractual obligations and fixed charges.
Right.
So right off the bat, that's salaries,
The union
insurance, et cetera.
contracts, I got you.
Beyond that, you have costs associated with reorganization. That's $340,000. That's been discussed openly, and that's a combination of those positions that will be needed and the increase or the additional cost to mostly the utilities.
I got you.
And with the other part of that is $194,000 of that were salaries that moved from school choice to the general fund. If we remember, we take on a considerable amount of salaries and 61% of our insurance into school choice. That's problematic because that's not money that's guaranteed. Of course, we don't know. We're doing very well, but we've kind of topped out. There's no more room to take in school choice students.
Right.
So that makes up the whole amount.
I see what you're saying. Okay. Now, as far as, did you get an opportunity to look at like 2 budgets, like budget with the override, budget without the override, and see how those would actually look? Have you did that at all?
Committees were given 6 scenarios.
Yes.
And so those were the 6 scenarios that we looked at. We went from everything with literally nothing being paid out of school choice to a plethora of other, other options. This, that, the other thing, and there were 6 of them. They were color coded. That was that meeting that I'm talking about.
Right.
So that is what the body had to basically take in and to digest in terms of what the budget would look like.
Okay. Did you all see the both budgets? I mean, as far as what with the override, what it was going to be, and then without the override.
Yeah, we saw that. I saw what the numbers were.
I did too.
Okay. Jeff, do you have
It
anything?
was at that meeting that we went to, the joint meeting.
Yep,
Both, yes.
yep. I just wanted, I know there was 7 options, I just wanted to see what the, one with the override,
There were
and one
6.
potentially without an override, and where, how would that fit in and
If you,
sit in?
if you took nothing out of school choice, and put everything into the general fund that's supposed to be in the general fund, you'd be $2.5 million over the budget.
Right.
That was whatever, I forgot what color, doesn't matter. If you're looking at an increase, if you take $200,000 of the health insurance and you move it around, that was 1.4. And then we just took different scenarios from that in terms of what could we take out of school choice and put to the general fund. Because ultimately what happens, as we discussed, is that if we lose roughly 20 to 25 kids naturally that are school choice kids every year. Graduation, school choice. I mean, Monty Tech. Kids who are here, school choice, they go to Monty Tech. We don't pay for them. They go. But those are kids that they're school choice out. So we lose about 20 to 25 kids. That's $100,000.
I see.
If I can't replace those, that's $100,000 less that I'm taking into school choice, which then will start to become an issue if 61% of your health insurance, for example, is in school choice.
It will erode the budget.
It will. And so when someone asks me, well, is this it for, are you ever gonna come back and ask again for an override? Is this it for a while? I simply said, given that scenario, I don't know, because it all depends on what I can do to recover. People have said things, well, why do we rely on school choice so much? Well, it's $704,000 net.
Right.
So that's an important number, obviously, because without that, we'd be in a deeper hole.
Right, well, I mean, I think all the numbers are important, and I think even going forward, because obviously discussion on this board, at least with the even looking at, I'm not gonna look at 21 right now, but I mean, even looking at 21, at 4%, that's about 800 some odd thousands of dollars that Templeton's obligation would be. That's at 4%. Now, obviously, we know as well as, we all know it's gonna be more than 4%, but I'm just saying, if you just use 4% based on what we contribute today, in 21, it's gonna be about 800,000 of dollars. That would be Templeton's responsibility to
Sure.
pay.
Yeah.
So on top of the 600+ thousands of dollars they were paying now, on top of potentially the override, next year is gonna be about another 800,000 of dollars.
Absolutely.
Okay, I wanna make sure that people understand that, because again, it's not that we're trying to, make numbers up. I mean, these are factual numbers that the school needs, and we understand that, but where do we go from here? People tell me, well, why does it have to burden the taxpayers? I'm like, well, because we live here. It's our responsibility. We're the taxpayers. It's our job to make sure we get what we need and what we vote for. These people voted for a school. They should have voted for an override when they voted for the school. But that didn't happen. So now here we are, collectively together. Jeff, do you have something to add?
No, just with regards to voting for the override right after that and how far back this goes to discuss. I remember that this committee back in 2015 at that special town meeting, Will Springs stood up and tried to speak to that. But the focus was just on, it's like people didn't want to talk about that, didn't want to hear. The focus was on passing the funding to get that step done.
Right.
And with regards with these numbers, this override and stuff was talked about at the district reorganization meeting last year. It had been talked with previous to that, when Chris came to the advisory committee meeting, or you go to a school committee meeting. They were talking about these numbers, but again, people don't show up. It wasn't broadcast. It's like you put it out there and everybody says, oh well, and now it's here in front of you.
Right, now we have so many variables.
It had been trying to be brought up at that special town meeting, but the mood of the meeting was they didn't.
Shut it down.
Will almost got booed off it was just focused on getting
Understood.
that one step done.
Mr. Chairman.
And then this has been talked about
Understood.
for over a year, so.
Thanks, Jeff.
Just-
Yes, Julie.
Mr. Chairman, I just had a question. Do you have a short-term or a long-term, and I think I've asked this at other meetings as well, to keep the town students in town? Do you have a goal? Do you have a plan not to sway off to school choice, other places, whatnot?
Sure.
How are your MCAS scores? I've brought it up more than once in the last 4 years I've been sitting here. Because I think the frustration at this point is You have a new school coming in, and you have people buying homes before they even hit the market. It's insane. So you have families coming in, and I'm just curious as to, do you have a long-term plan to try to keep these families in our school district? Because I think it keeps the money here. When they school choice out, you have to question, why are they?
Sure.
And with a budget like this, and I agree with John that the budget's only gonna have more of a question next year and more of a challenge for the town to try to support it, which we all, I think, do try to support it. We also, one of our top things as select people here is safety of the town.
Sure.
And we can't cut there anymore. We still don't have one department that is back up to par from 2009. So we're working on that. But as far as the school goes, you know, I'm just wondering, how can we build that where people want to go to the school and not like venture out of town when they build a house or they buy a house in town?
So,
I don't know.
okay. So first, fewer kids are going to Monty Tech than they have in the last 3 years. You have
Okay,
that,
that's
I'm sure, in
good.
some report. I'm sure you do. You have fewer kids who are going to charter schools than in the last 5 years. You currently have a plus of 109 kids, a school choice in versus out. Okay, it's 109. It has never been higher in this district. That's a fact. You have more kids now than you did since let's see, FY’13, when FY’13 was really your low. You had 1374 and 14. You're at 1436 currently right now, give or take. That number changes literally every day. We're not even open for school choice for obvious reasons. We had to open the portal because so many people are calling us. We have 40 to 50 applications. 26 of them are kindergarten right now.
Wow.
If you are looking, for example, just as in raw numbers, all data that can easily be proven, there is no place probably more sought after other than Ash West than us, and that's period, right now. Check it out. It's all online. The other part is, the question is, what are you doing exactly? Well, in that book, you're going to see the things that we're doing. We're one of 10 districts in the state that has I always say robotics, but it's a STEM project, pre-K to 12.
STEM, yeah.
That's over 80 grand in grants that we received, one of 10. So that's a big deal. Next year, if the budget allows, we're going to be offering 2 college courses right at the high school. We're going to be able to offer from the Mount, okay? You know, so what else do we do? Well, we make more money. This school makes more money, and I said this before. If you allow me to use revenue as an example of Medicaid, school choice, and grants, you haven't seen a school in probably your tenure take in more money. We're looking at $1.4 million with all 3 of those. By the way, our E&D is over $600,000. That's because of our Medicaid, because we go after every dime. By the way, it's still not enough. So your example of how money grows is exact. So we were looking for 3% last year. We agreed because people were having a tough time to 1 point, whatever it was. I'd have to literally look back. Well, that number, that amount is in here, folks. Whatever that amount we didn't get, we had to either put off into school choice or whatever, but that money, that number grows. So we know that. So the fact is that you're looking at a situation, you're hearing me say it again tonight. And yeah, I get passionate about it because we're working hard, really hard, right? But this override has to happen, sure. We know that. But the day, if it does pass, God willing, we're going to have to look at how we're going to have to reconfigure this district financially. Because you are literally going to be sitting in a district that's going to it's going to be the Groundhog Day of school finance. We're going to be here X amount of days going, I wonder why we're $200,000 there, whatever the case is. Because financially, we're not sound. We're not built to be sound. So I guess the alternative is you take whatever projected 111 kids from Phillipston, you pack them into Templeton Center, you cut about 19, 15, 14, whatever. If the override doesn't happen, I don't know. We'll have to figure it out. You're going to have you're going to have numbers of 24, 25, 26 per class. by the way, no extra staff up there, that's not gonna sit well. School choice goes down, you start losing money. I'm back here next year going, guess what? The 61% that we take out of school choice for insurance, which by the way, no one else takes out that much for health insurance in their school choice. I'm gonna tell you that right now. I'm gonna say I'm gonna need $300,000 just to cover that cost because I can't make it up with school choice. And you're gonna say, well, why not, Chris? Why don't they like the district? Well, they love the district. We're full. Because people want to come in at kindergarten because they want to go in through the cohort. They don't want to come in during the 5th grade because they've already made their friends.
Right,
Gotcha.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Understood,
Remind
thank
you,
you.
Dr. Castavant, how many children the new school house? Is it 589?
It can house as many, in terms of classroom and seating. The classrooms are built for 26 kids per.
Okay,
So what would happen if you, you could use the extra art room as a classroom. You could use the maker space as a classroom. You could utilize, but you would need teachers in order to use them. You could sit 700 in there, I guess. I mean, depending on how many classrooms there are in there. There are
Okay.
classrooms and there are rooms which you could utilize as classrooms.
okay, thank you.
Gotcha. Does anyone have anything else to add? Yes.
I have a question. Let's play the game that no one in town goes school choice. Nobody stays home. Nobody goes to a religious school. Nobody goes anywhere except for Narragansett.
Yep.
You've got 222 students that you surveyed with the 148 families.
So,
If-
go ahead.
If all of those students stayed in district, K through 12,
Yep.
what would happen to your numbers, and how would your school choice intake be impacted?
So our foundation enrollment, great question. Foundation enrollment, as we've talked about before, are the number of students who are school aged who go to public school anywhere in the state. Doesn't matter if they're school choiced out, doesn't matter if they're going to a public charter, they're counted. That's what our foundation, that's how we receive our money. So our foundation amount per child who's actually in district, I'm gonna round, is $11,000. It's a little bit more than that. If they school choice out, they take $5,000 off the top and we basically get the rest. The only kids that they don't are private school and homeschool. So we have the least amount of those kids. What would that do? We wouldn't see much of an impact because truthfully, there are, again, we don't know all the kids who might be private school. We just don't know. But we know that if we receive 200 more kids, it would depend on their ages, quite frankly, right? So if they're elementary, well, currently, I don't know. It would depend on how many. If they were, middle or high school, fine, right? I'm not trying to dodge.
No.
I would literally need to know that. But if they were all elementary kids, if all 200 or so were all elementary, yeah, we'd have a bit of an issue. We'd have to, like we did last year, we had to hire 2 more teachers. The numbers became too big at the middle school. You'd have to hire 2 elementary teachers and we'd have to put them someplace. Probably at the TC in one of the classrooms that we were talking about. We'd have to make another classroom. I'm just, again, it's hard for me to, I don't know what their ages are.
Yeah, no,
Or grades, I should say.
just for the sake of doing it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Good question.
Great question.
Anything else? Nothing? So you talked about options. So what were the options that you provided to the people that?
It's been an exercise in honesty. If they ask me a question, I tell them. By the way, I failed to say this. I also say, I don't make the decision. I have bosses, right? So the school committee, I don't make any decision on my own. It's community input, et cetera. But if those options are that. I mean, if we don't get X or Y, well, Chris, do you really need a Spanish teacher? Well, no, we don't need I guess we don't need a Spanish teacher. People feel it's important, but yeah, you can cut and you can whittle it down. But the amount of money, people ask those direct questions. Well, do we need a 504 para? Do we need to do these type of things? Well, yes, no. Okay, we don't have one now, so I guess we can keep going without it, that type of stuff. Those that we play, and I shouldn't say it that way. We don't play the game, but we go through that. But the positions that we've mentioned, the special education teacher, no way around that. Have to have it. Have to have it because we have special needs children who have to be serviced. Guidance, have to have it because we've already moved them over. So I mean, those type of things, we get into those type of conversations. Most people wanted to know where their kindergarten and pre-K are going to go. So if the number one question has been, okay, I got it, but where ultimately are they going to be going to school? Are they going to be going to Templeton Center if they're from Templeton and they're a kindergartner? Of course, we say yes, they are. Yes, that's what they're going to happen. Yes, pre-K is going to go to Templeton Center. Of course, they are. That kind of stuff. That's generally the kind of things that we talk about. But what I said here tonight is what I've been telling them.
obviously, so, I mean, it puts us in a position too, because obviously we support the override. We support the school.
Sure.
But obviously, if the override doesn't pass, it really puts the entire town, the village, in a quandary.
Yeah.
Because
Agreed.
obviously, we wouldn't have the amount of money to open the school. And how would that go up? And I know you look at me kind of funny, like, well, I mean, what if you don't open the school? How much money would that save us? Then we have an empty building. And I'm like, yeah, then the insurance rates go up.
You'd
and
have to
then-
open the building though.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying.
You'd have to open it.
I mean, of course we want, I mean, of
With what?
course. I mean, but if we don't have the funds to open the school,
Well, someone would have to, well, you'd have to reconsolidate. Again, you'd have to, reconsolidation means RIF of teachers. That's what that means.
yeah, well, that,
You take X amount of teachers and you go, okay, you've either been here longer or not.
Right.
Than the person that you're gonna bump, and with that comes savings. There are $956,000 in salary down at Phillipston. That doesn't translate into $956,000 if you RIF, right?
Right.
Because someone who makes $70,000, been here a long time, they bump somebody who makes 40, your net is 30. So you know, it's a basic math issue.
Mm-hmm.
So riffing that would be about $500,000, so you'd have to figure it out. You'd have to, right.
yeah, because we're in the process too of figuring stuff out too. We don't call it a RIF.
No,
You know, we
well,
call it
reduction
closing
of force is
departments.
contractual language, but yeah.
Because again, we would have to close departments, I mean, to meet the, you know,
Well,
the deadlines, I mean, and the guidelines.
We understand that, because
Well,
obviously $167,000 attached to our override is for the police department. I mean, we know that, we discussed that. And so that's what that's there, and if that doesn't go through, then that happens. So we know that. Oh, no, we're good. I mean, we're on board. Trust me, we're on board.
We're on board too, but I'm
You know,
just, and again,
I'm sorry, could you make that statement one more time? 100 and what?
It's part of the presentation, but the school really only, when I say only.
$156,000 is attached to the police department?
I didn't say police department. It's right here. It's in my
Since
slide.
when?
I don't know.
I've-
We
this
only
is the
need,
first
I don't
I've heard
know,
of this.
we need 820, I can't even, is 820 on my glasses? 820,000 is what that the school needs from Templeton. We took
Well,
on
this is my first knowledge of that.
2% over last year doesn't meet the minimums. That's pretty, I mean, 2%, 2.5% over what we received last year doesn't meet your minimum, doesn't meet the minimums. But through the additional appropriation, you know, that whole thing where the money goes, it's,
I'm sorry, Carter?
There is a complete and total disagreement between this body and the school district as to whether or not we must automatically increase the net minimum school spending and the transportation with new, fresh money, and whether or not previous overrides accrue automatically to the school district. That's where we part company.
we don't really part company. We understand that that's the statute.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, we understand that's the statute,
Right.
but I think
We
we
need
part
the money. If we
company as to
needed it
whether or
back
not-
then, we certainly need it now,
as to
right?
whether or not that's been the practice, perhaps, might be a better way to put it.
I agree. I agree with that.
So what was done was the increase in net minimum school spending and the increase in transportation was met by reducing the additional monies, such that that overall component could stay within a 2.5% total increase. And then the balance moves to the override.
So the 988,336 is all for the school. It has nothing to do with the police department.
Nothing to do with the
Nothing.
police department.
Zero. That's why that
Well, that is-
statement is shocking to me, because I asked for an override for $100,000 for the police department,
Right.
separate from you, completely separate.
If I may, there was an effort, we did talk at one point about combining them, and there was a desire and an
To
effort
not.
to keep it separate and clean. So this
Right.
nine
So-
Separate
eighty-eight
and clean.
changes is solely the schools at this point.
That
So
was
this
never
is-
conveyed to the school.
I'm sorry, so it's separate. It's separate.
Oh, okay, and I certainly agree.
I'm sorry, I was like,
I
I'm
certainly agree,
shocked.
but I will tell you,
Yep.
that separation was never conveyed to the school.
Okay, so
Okay.
this was never conveyed to
Right.
us, or me, at least.
Okay,
I
hold on
have-
one second. Carter, go ahead.
I have to respectfully disagree. We sat in my office, Dr. Cassavant, the chairman, we talked about all of these numbers, and there was a very strong desire expressed by them to keep the override to them, to keep it clean, to keep it straight, to keep it simple. And if there was a misunderstanding about that with 3 folks from the school district there, and maybe I should have had another person there from our side of the house, but I don't understand how that could not have been clearer, because it was expressed by their chairman. And the bottom line is, this is where we're at.
Okay.
We don't take questions.
We typically don't take questions in workshop. Yes, go ahead, Tony.
Okay, so the 988,336, is that all on Templeton, or is part of that on Phillipston?
No,
That's all Templeton.
All Templeton.
So the actual deficit is more.
About $1.2 million.
$1.2 million.
Okay.
I have in the original PowerPoint, and I have
Okay.
Phillipson's
No, I just wanted to
breakdown
make,
as well.
I just wanted to make sure that, so the
I
actual.
have Phillipson's breakdown as
deficit
well.
is 1.2 million. Okay,
That's $1.2 million.
okay.
That's the
No,
deficit.
that's fine.
Jeff, you have something else to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, when you get to try to stem some of the confusion or possible confusion. The override is for, so Templeton can pay a bill.
to the school.
Because the school assessment, whatever they certify to send to the town, is basically a bill for services.
That's right.
Right.
And with all of the other services that Templeton is providing, whether it be the police department, the highway, this building, all of that stuff, the total cost equals whatever, 10 million. And what we can raise from everything, state aid, local receipts, and property taxes, you know, we have, say, and I'm just making these numbers up, we have 9.5 million. So somewhere we need 500,000. The town needs X amount of dollars, and the easiest, the most logical way to go at it right now, without drastically cutting one side or the other, or having a long dispute over the summer up until December, is for the town to request of the taxpayers an override so that the town can pay a bill. I just, you know, oh, we need a school override, oh, we need a police override. The town, if that's their chosen path, needs an override to pay its bills. It's, you know,
Right.
a school, an override, we need an override for the police department, we need an override for the, no, you need an override to pay the town's bills.
Right.
It's, because that's what the school assessment is. It's a bill for services of educating the children, and
Right.
state law mandates, you know, that we have to pay that.
Right, my concern, just like the advisory committees, is if the override does not pass, then our options are pretty narrowed at that point to what we can and cannot do, and that's my fear.
And the alternative isn't any better, Mr. Chairman. I did talk with
I-
Christine Lynch. I spoke with Christine
Yeah.
Lynch and said, I've never heard of a 112. Like, I've heard of it. I've never been through, and she even,
No, it's-
she works at the Department of Ed, and she's like, yeah,
not
not
good.
a lot of people do.
No.
It's not a good process. It's an awful process.
is.
and for
They're in your
everybody
office.
involved. So we had a long conversation with her.
Good.
Because we had never spoke to anyone
Yeah.
who could give us any information on the process. So, yeah, it was it wasn't a pleasant conversation by any stretch. You know what I
No,
mean? It was like, oh.
It's
okay,
not.
That's, because the state ultimately can then just come in and make it, but they make it very difficult until that point in time, so.
And they make it difficult for both parties, by the way, not just the school.
Oh, no, no.
Both parties, I mean,
it's
you
both
might not be
parties.
happy, we might not, but either
Everybody's
way,
not
nobody's not happy.
Yeah.
Nobody's not gonna be happy.
So I can
Yes.
get the numbers correctly. So your overall school budget's 20+ million. Of that, subtract, the stuff you get for state aid, et cetera, the income.
All the
so to
Chapter
speak.
70 and all that stuff,
Yeah,
yeah.
all that. Subtract, Phillipston's
Contribution.
piece.
Contribution, right.
What is the town of Templeton's piece based on that, the 20 million number, which I understand includes,
Be what, 7 mil, what was it?
556 shortfall.
7 million,
7
is
million
that
what?
the 7,479,
479.
406 one?
406.
Okay, and that includes the total budget, that doesn't say, okay, it's this much, but we also need 988, that's the total budget.
Inclusive of the
So on the
988.
town warrant, will that 7.4,
Yes, and we have a clean warrant to distribute to you
Yes.
momentarily.
okay,
So let's say the
That's
7 million.
just what I
for-
wanted to know.
Right.
okay.
You must put before the meeting the assessment number that comes to you from the school district.
Okay,
Good question, Tony.
so that's really, Dr. Katzman, that's the number you need from Templeton to operate, assuming you get it from Phillips, and that's the number you need to operate the school district according to your, plan, okay? All right,
Great. Any other questions? Anything else over on the advisory committee side?
No.
Great. Dr. Cosman, thank you
Thank
so much for
you.
coming in. I
Thanks,
really do
Sharon.
appreciate it. Thank you for, doing what you do over there.
Well,
Thank you.
it isn't me, it's honestly them.
I know, but-
They do a fantastic job.
your staff.
Thanks so much. Thank you, staff. Thanks to the school committee. Annual town election ballot questions, Mr. Tenzini?
What I'd like to do is to go through the town meeting warrant.
Sure.
Discuss the
Sounds
budget,
good.
come back to this.
Yep,
I think it would be a better progression,
sounds good.
so,
Do you have the warrant packet?
Which page? Oh, we're getting it.
So what I'd like to do, Mr. Chairman, is walk you through the latest draft, not at great length, but to explain to you where some
Please.
changes have been made and
Yep.
where we have some work to do over the next few days. Then walk you through some issues that have happened in the budget. Then let Adam, and get a sense of direction. Then let Adam make his presentation on the expense and revenue projections for the next 5 years, and then return to the override question at that point. I think that would be a better progression.
Okay. Sounds good.
So, we did have a conference call, Holly, Adam, Carol Harris, and myself this morning with town council, and I'll walk you through. Article 1 remains the same. Article 2, some of these numbers are gonna be dramatically different. For instance, we had projected in the original draft 60,000 for snow and ice. Given we had some good luck last night, we think that's gonna be much lower.
Okay.
So those numbers will come in with some clarity over the next couple of days. We have some litigation that we met on yesterday, and then we think is gonna resolve. So with the Selectmen's litigation and codification might come down a little bit as well. Article 3 is a pop-up. We had an article to sell Baldwinville Elementary School. That's not gonna happen on the timeline that we had thought about. We have a proposal to buy it for $500,000 or a variable payment based on some other factors. And we also have, and for cannabis cultivation and processing. That involves not just selling the school, but it involves a possible zoning amendment, and it involves a host community agreement with them.
Can I ask you a question on the article? Is that appropriate?
I'm sorry?
What's
Is
that,
it a-
Tony?
Can I ask you a question on the?
Sure, go ahead.
In here it states cultivate, process, and retail.
We had a request for letters of interest out separately from Baldwinville School, from parties who might be interested in having cultivation,
So
processing, or
this isn't
retail.
just legal fees in general.
It's a preparation.
We got a second proposal for a retail shop when we closed.
Okay.
So that would cover that host community agreement as well.
Okay, is it in the same location?
No, it's on the other side of town completely. And the
It's
difference
Totally
bet-
separate. from
Totally
this.
separate.
Right, and the difference between a host community agreement is that's a 5-year impact fee, whereas retail is a forevermore until repealed kind of thing.
Okay, yeah, okay.
So,
Just
we're
saw 'em put
gonna
together.
be
I had
looking
no
for
idea
some
about that.
money to set us up to do that.
Yep.
And we have tentatively set, assuming this passes town meeting, tentatively set June 4 as the first neighborhood meeting to meet with the Baldwinville folks, and then we have a new board, a new majority coming into office, so we want to just check back in with them. But this would give us the monies. If town meeting doesn't appropriate this, then we don't have the monies to work on it, and this really becomes the first test. Supplemental contributions, that's the same. Consent agenda is the same. Article 6, we initially, in the initial draft, had a base appropriation, the 6 million and change, and then a supplemental appropriation. We were trying to keep those separate. Town council tells us we cannot do it that way, that we have to present it in this fashion. We have presented it contingent upon the passage of the Prop 2.5 ballot question. Some of the bylaws, town council has pulled a number out. He doesn't want to do them as in the codification. He thinks they should be more transparent for the community. However, so for instance, on Article 7, you'll notice that there's only, on that whole page, there's only 2 lines where there's changes. On the next page, you'll notice there are no changes whatsoever. Same with page 8. On page 9, you'll notice there's only 1 article that has any changes. So we have talked with town council about whether or not we could present this in a shorter, more abbreviated fashion, which still puts the changes in front of everybody, but doesn't necessarily have 5 pages when there's only perhaps 3 sections that are getting changed.
That sounds
So
great, because I'm not reading that.
We've sent, well, that's we would propose to waive the readings as we did at the last meeting.
You get that one.
Like on page 10, again, you'll notice there's no change. So, and again on page 11. So, we have talked with Carol Harris and with council, and we're gonna look at what it would do to the warrant if we just presented those sections that have those changes. To keep them out and transparent, which I think was the political goal, and the PR goal, but to not have 5 pages when you're only making 6 lines of changes. The municipal violations, no changes. Again, please, we've had this out there for a while. We have gotten a couple of comments.
What page are we on?
Page
All the way up to page 19 at this point.
So no changes all the way up.
Thank you.
Page 19 is a little different than what came before you. The first one was a bylaw which essentially parroted the entirety of the state law. By adopting the statute, we're able to have a much a simpler provision of statute. On 21,
Article 10.
22, 23. 23, we had some, we've added a change for the Veterans Advisory Committee that the Veteran Services Officer requested. We have removed the potential placeholders with respect to the Sewer Commission. We, I believe, have reached agreement with the Sewer Commission on the payment of certain bills and indirect costs, and the transfer of the collections here to Town Hall. They will be meeting Monday, and they need to formally vote on all of this. Because of the quorum, I can only work with 1 member, so I've been working with the member that they assigned to work on all these issues. We need to get their formal votes, but based upon the tentative agreement with that member and his belief that it would meet the needs of the balance of the commission, we've removed those placeholders at this point in time. We certainly hope that Wednesday night, when we present this for a final vote, you don't have to see them again. But I do think we've closed all of those gaps. Article 13,
Carter, just a note on the Veterans Advisory, you have
Yes.
that as Article 14.
Yep.
And then, so your articles are a little misnumbered here?
yeah, we'll, we'll have to do that as we're pulling things out today.
Housekeeping.
Yep.
Okay, just don't,
And there was a change suggested by council. We got very late this afternoon
okay.
to deal with some of these issues. I'm afraid at the end it does kind of roll rather quickly. Article 13, Mr. Chairman, we had, I don't know the results of your conversation and whether I'm putting this in with text or whether I'm holding this till the fall.
Okay.
Article, so that I need that at some point.
Roger, you got it.
14, there's no real changes. This one's pretty straightforward. You have a zoning regulation in your general bylaws, and they shouldn't be there.
Mm-hmm.
They need to be in the zoning bylaws. On page 37 of the copy that I have, zoning map, we're awaiting the codification of existing town bylaws. It's a 305-page document. So we're waiting from town council for a simpler, cleaner 1 or 2 paragraphs of how we deal with this. Because I think we would all agree that we don't want to publish the 300 and plus or minus pages. Article 17, I need to talk with you about for a moment. You're proposing under this bylaw to sell 2 parcels of land to the Commonwealth.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is we don't have clean title to one of them. Everybody around us says they abut our lands. There's some tax title properties, but the town doesn't have clean title. So the choice was that the Commonwealth accept all of our right title and interest. They weren't really interested in that approach.
Mm-hmm.
The second is we'll probably have to clean the title up through eminent domain. So what you do is you take the property from owner unknown. You have to put the value into an escrow with the court for 2 years. If owner unknowns ever show up and challenge you for all or any portions of the ownerships, then you pay them out of that. Otherwise, the money comes back to us. Tom thinks that we could do that with the proceeds of the second parcel, the parcel that has the clear title. So he's got some work to do on this, and he was working with the state on language that they would find agreeable, because they want a clean, quiet title. Article 19, we have some work to do with the sewer commission yet, because of some things that are going on within their budget, some things they forgot to put in, some numbers that weren't quite right, and now the collections process that it appears we have agreed to move forward to. On Article 20, they don't have any objection to making these contributions, but I think they'd like to have a chance to talk a little bit about perhaps contributing at a little slower pace, or talking about how much the capital gets built up to. And then again, in the interest of good harmony, we told them that we're absolutely open to having that conversation with them. The sewer capital project, they spoke to that when they were before us, and we've added that.
Okay.
So these, I spoke to the placeholders that have been struck at this point. Cable, community preservation, expending of community preservation. So at this point, I'm on page 40. Templeton Scholarship, Article 25, subject to being renumbered. 26, haven't changed. Town Council, we await some wording as to the issue of the fiscal year salary and how he would like to see us handle that, in keeping with your decision of 2 weeks ago, I believe, perhaps a week ago. Article 28, this for the moment is the operating budget. I do have some issues to discuss with you here momentarily. And also I put before town council the matter of a trigger. If the override does not pass, is it conceivable in any way that we could have an automatic trigger so that we know what our town budget is? So
Yeah,
that you
that's-
don't start on July 1 expending this budget, only to find out in December that you don't have this budget because you have to go back in.
Right.
So balancing those things out, what that trigger might look like, how it would work, we've got some work to do on that on the next couple of days. But that is a real difficult issue, if the override were not to pass.
Right, what options would we have at that point? I mean, that's gonna be the question.
Yeah,
Because because we've looked at the numbers, even if we were able to shut down all the ancillary stuff that we potentially could shut down, we would still be about $600,000 short. Give or take
at least.
that's what I'm saying, so then you
That's
start,
at
then you
the
start going
very
into
least.
personnel. You know, you start hitting the personnel piece where, and then what personnel piece do you hit?
So we're thinking that if we can come up with some workable trigger,
Mm-hmm.
because otherwise you spend and you spend and you spend, and then you get to November or December, if their budget passes anyways, you now have to try to find $1 million in your budget with 6 months of your budget year left.
Right,
That's the difficulty with these
absolutely.
situations.
you.
So we have some work to do on that.
Okay.
Articles 29, 30, and 31, Tom felt there'd been some changes to law that no longer require these be presented in this fashion, as long as there's money in the budget to fund them. He's checking on that. At a minimum, they would no longer have a specific sum
I got
of
you.
money, because we're not close enough yet. So they would say to appropriate a sum of money, instead of saying to appropriate the sum of. 32, 33, I'll talk to you about the capital budget under a separate heading. 35, none of those things have changed. We have the 3 citizens petitions, and based upon conversations to date, the petitioner for Article 38 would appear, has spoken to making no motion.
I got you.
Or passing
Pass it over, got it.
the article.
And when's their meeting, you said Monday?
Monday.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's gonna be tight.
Yeah,
So
go ahead, give us a couple
unless
days.
there are, if there are questions on the warrant, I do need to know about the one bylaw. If there are other questions on the warrant or sense of direction, I really need that, like, I don't know, tonight would be great.
When do the override questions
yesterday.
get put on?
Override questions do not get put onto the warrants
Okay,
unless you are funding something. So if you have an override that you wanna do, and we can talk about that in the ballot question issue, I would then automatically add it to the warrant. But the
Okay.
ballot question itself does
Oh,
not
okay.
go on the warrant.
okay.
That goes on the election warrant that we will be presenting to you next Wednesday evening. Town clerk
just
prepared a draft,
Mhm.
submitted it this morning, Holly.
Okay.
So you'll need to decide the override question by next Wednesday, for sure.
Questions, probably?
Que-
Maybe,
Whatever your pleasure is,
thank you.
next Wednesday is essentially your last day to do that.
Great. Anybody
So
else?
if there is something to be added, then we would add a warrant article subject to the successful passage of an appropriation, subject to the successful passage.
Gotcha. Any other questions? Jeff?
The warrant. Do you have 3 more copies of these?
I thought we handed enough down, but yes, we do, Jeff.
Okay,
You need 3 more copies? Okay.
I just wanna give them to the members.
Obviously, there's some housekeeping that
Holly
needs to
has them.
take place with this, with the document. You guys, we working on that. Some housekeeping,
Yeah.
some, numbers needs to be in
What
line.
I try to do is we give you a draft. A lot of times it has, then we start cutting and pasting. Then we start sending single warrant articles to town council that we think needs some early.
Mhm.
And then as we get closer and I have what I think's the final warrant, then I give it to them, so I don't have them reviewing constantly the same things and just burning money.
I understand. Jeff, you guys are meeting with, as the advisory committee on the warrant as well, as the drafts get pushed towards you.
We look at them, but we really don't take any, more or less discussion in case something, we had a big question.
That was my big thing, questions. If you guys have questions, make sure you get them up to the BOS office as soon as possible. That way, we can address them quickly. That way, you're not here at, the special, your meeting and pre-town having questions, you know what I mean, where all the questions should be answered before pre-town meeting, I would hope, if you have questions. Perhaps. That way, it's not like 4 hours, it's like maybe 2 hours.
Well, the plan of the moment is to have this finalized at your business meeting of April 10.
Okay.
Get your signatures that night, get it scanned and off to advisory committee the next day, based upon the warrant approval, which your business meeting would include the final budget adoption. We would then, the next day, be able to send them the final
Okay.
spreadsheet
And that gives you enough time.
as well.
Well, I mean, if we get it, 6 of one, half dozen of the other, I mean, it's gonna have to be enough time.
Okay.
I think based on the changes that we recommended in our bylaw, it's plus or minus, it's actually, I think, minus a couple days, but just the way the timing works for this period, when the town meeting is,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's sufficient. You've included us in all these meetings now, and I think that's been a big help.
Right. Any questions concerning the warrant?
Are you going to go through the capital, or you said at a later
I'm
date?
gonna touch on them during the budget review.
Okay.
Any other
I
questions?
mean, I can do it under the guise of the warrant, I can do whatever the body wants.
No, I was just asking because you
Doesn't
you
matter.
said to save it for later.
Okay, so, warrants. Where do you want to go into next? Do you want to do the,
I'd like to touch upon some things in the budget
okay,
to determine additions, deletions, objections, so that I can finalize that, because that then drives part of the warrant.
okay.
Within the budget, we've had the cut on the town clerk, which has been tentatively put into the selectmen's budget. Bob Sojic came to see me, and he feels that the condition of Berry Road and Royalston and 1 or 2 others are just so bad, he's gotta get some work done on them. So he's asked to present a new Chapter 90 plan, which we'll finalize in the next day or 2. It does mean that one of the roads that had been scheduled for some extensive work has to fall off in order to accommodate his other work, and that is
What page are-
Hamlet Mill Road,
Oh, what page are we going to?
269.
Hamlet Mills and Otter River. Yeah, Hamlet Mill.
So, on Hamlet Mill Road, on page 269, you'll see was scheduled for 107,000. That he is proposing to reallocate elsewhere. We also need to deal with the Main Street Bridge.
Well, Hamlet Mills Bridge as well.
Well,
We haven't got there yet.
yeah. So we'll have that emailed out to everybody by Monday. And we're gonna reallocate some of the tool money and such as well to try to give Bob as much as he needs on the paving side of the house.
Okay.
While we're kind of in capital, and I don't wanna mix things up, but in highway, Jeff had some questions. We promised him a sit-down with Bob, so that if he had any concerns about budget, he could share them with the board, or he could tell you his questions had been answered, or, you know, he still had concerns, and I just wanna make sure that Jeff has had his questions answered in that sit-down.
Can we talk about the
Snow and ice.
snow and ice?
I talked to, I met with Bob this past Friday, talked with him for
A while.
couple hours. We got talking
What?
about, no, we got talking about construction stuff, you know stuff.
Okay, let's,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, we got, I got questions that I had answered, and we
You
talked
felt
about,
comfortable?
we talked about a lot of that stuff. It was,
So you have no questions for this board?
no, I just, me and
Okay.
Bob, we were just talking about.
So good.
Okay.
I mean, we made the department head available. I wanted to make sure that that happened, and he was able to share that with
Great.
you. So, in the capital schedule, page 230. We need to, I just need to double check the math, and I was off by 10,000, I believe, on the Templeton municipal. The 67 is probably gonna be 56. I had inverted how much they were giving us for electric versus what we were paying them. I had those numbers upside down.
Okay.
So I need to go back in and just double check all of that.
There's no
But
fingerprint scanner on.
We're in very good shape.
Really?
Adam?
Where's the
Adam, you
fingerprint
have a
scanner?
question?
Do I have a question?
Yeah.
No, I'm just working with Diane.
All right,
No, I just can't read this page.
Well, I
okay, well,
just can't
I'll try
hear.
to,
We'll try to get some when we give you the final, we'll give you some print versions in 11 by 17.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So there's probably gonna be 10 or 15 in here now. But we're gonna have such a dramatic reduction on the snow and ice and some of the backfills that we're gonna be in good shape on that overall. So unless there are capital items that you didn't wanna fund, nothing has changed other than some of the allocations between the columns might move, Diane. That's it.
Not for me.
If you have a minute before you leave, we'll print it out at 11 by 17 when we're done here.
No, it's okay. It's just, I think just in the future, if we could have more of a fold-out page.
The other thing, if you can go online, that you can expand and blow
Oh,
up
okay.
too.
I like to write on mine.
Now, and we talked in exec about the CBA and what the impact of that will be, that we'll be adjusted for. Now, for the interesting one. We have been approached by a neighboring, before I get into the interesting one and get off track, are there any changes that you still want in the budget?
Are we gonna have an override for the police department? Are we gonna let the people decide?
Can I suggest that we let Adam make his presentation on the revenue and expense
Sure,
before we get into that discussion?
that's my only question.
Yeah. So, in that case, we were contacted by a neighboring community which has been struggling with keeping in place a finance team that meets their needs. They have asked us if we would consider doing it on a regional basis.
Having trouble financing their what?
finance
Keeping
team.
a finance team in place.
Finance team?
Mhm.
Oh.
Right now, they are using an independent contractor who's proving extremely expensive, not meeting their needs. And so Kelly and I would ask Kelly to come up to the table if that's agreeable with you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Hi, Kelly.
Hi.
Come on, Kelly.
So we sat down with them and talked about what their needs were. I talked with Kelly. She then went over to the community and talked through all the issues. And we it came up with a proposal which does involve them changing software so it would be compatible with ours so that there's no learning curve and all that good stuff. There is a shortfall between what they can pay us initially and what we would need in the $10,000 range. But I believe that we can cover that shortfall either by relooking at the revenue estimates or the potential of a community compact grant. We spoke with them this morning and asked them for the cash to cover the shortfall. They didn't like that part too much. But if you'll remember, when they were beating the drum for sharing the town administrators, they spoke to all the money that they had poured into the technology to set those communities up to do that. So we've gone back and asked them to cover the costs of buying the new software for the neighboring community. That community would then take the money it was going to spend on the software and bulk up what they would pay us. Instead of paying it to the new vendor, they would use those same dollars they needed to spend to pretty much close the gap. We would need to increase the assistant town accountant, and we would need to make some compensation to Kelly for handling 2 communities. Before we go down the road much further, I'd like to ask Kelly to speak to what she says the benefits, and then see if you're interested in this approach, because I would need to account for it in the budget.
Okay. Kelly?
Well, I think it's gonna be a great thing for, in the aspect of the communities in Central Mass. You know, we are all in the point where we're all struggling, you know, with trying, as we can see, trying to make ends meet, keeping staff. You know, I'm willing to do this. You know, when Carter talks about the compensation, it's not very much. That would require me to go there 1 day a week. The agreement would be that there would be 1 day a week that either myself or my assistant, we would go to that neighboring community and work there and take care of their, you know, financial needs, work with their, the treasurer collector, with the person that does their payroll and all of that, so that there would be a cohesiveness in our communities. So, you know, let's say something happens, you know, you can work together as a team. So, I mean, I think that would be a benefit. You know, also that the DOR, that's one of the things that they're definitely, you know, wanting is regionalization of communities because of the overhead that it costs to run a town and with the, you know, revenue, you know. So, I mean, I think the benefit for us is that it opens us up for more regionalizing opportunities. I think that will show good faith to the area communities that we're working toward that. Just like, you know, we've got right now with the potential regionalization with the fire department with, you know, Phillipston.
Shared services.
Or shared services, I'm sorry.
About the regionalization.
I'm sorry. Shared services, so it's like the same thing. You know, am I excited about taking on the new responsibility? Not real, but, you know, I want to do what's best. And, you know, I think I've proven that by staying here and working through all the audits and getting all of that done, that, you know, I'm dedicated to stay here in Templeton. I'm not going anywhere. You know, my husband and I bought a house. We're stuck here. This is how it is. Not planning to go anywhere. In Central Mass, okay?
A lot of us stuck here.
I know, yeah. So, you know, I do think that it will be a benefit, and also for the town. Nicole and I, you know, then we would both be full-time, but we would have the shared responsibilities, but I think it would be a good fit for the town.
Great. You have a question?
I just had one quick question. Now, if the override doesn't pass for the school budget,
Then I probably won't be stuck here.
I'm guessing that cuts are gonna be made.
Right.
Unfortunately.
Right.
So if you do not have an assistant, and I agree
Right.
with regionalization,
Right.
it's on you.
Exactly.
So how do you feel about that?
Well, at that point, I mean, that would,
It's
we
a
would
little
have
too
to.
much,
We'd
Yeah.
have to-
correct?
We'd have to scrub the effort.
We
If the
couldn't do
override
that.
Have to
didn't
scrub it.
pass,
Yeah.
We'd have to scrub this.
Okay.
Right.
It-
Yeah, I mean,
Okay,
there's, yeah,
I just wanted to
Because-
check.
Let me,
yeah.
let me just say that getting to.
You know, I don't want to,
100%. Yeah.
No.
And we would,
Yeah.
we would advise, we've been trying to be very interactive with this other community. Okay,
yeah.
here's where we
We've
think
been
we're headed, does that push back, you know? And we think we can close the gap. Let me just say that if the override doesn't pass, this is amongst the smallest of your problems.
Okay.
Right.
Finding $990,000 in your budget,
It's gonna hurt.
yeah. So we think we can come pretty close to closing the gap in different ways. But before we go through reworking all the budget and doing everything else, and then out going back to the state, I didn't wanna go back to the state and say, yep, here's the numbers, bring the check. Did we get the letter for them to sign tonight for the governor? In their signature folder?
It's in their signature.
Okay. There is a letter to the governor, sorry, ADHD, chicken across the road. On the generator, if you could all get that signed
Yeah.
tonight.
Well, the
But
other,
we didn't wanna bulk up, go back to the state and bulk up the budget if this idea was not of some interest to you.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that, I mean, I commend you guys and the team. I mean, we've talked about, we've got to increase revenue, we've got to increase revenue, we've got to increase revenue. And here is an example of thinking outside of the box, recognizing an opportunity, and putting your arms around what is the opportunity and how will it benefit us. So, I mean, I think it's, you know, it's a great opportunity that we should take advantage of, if we can. I mean, it's probably good for both communities.
And it would increase retention opportunities. We talk a lot
Increase
of,
in revenue.
well, it's revenue neutral, it's expense
It's
neutral
just
at the end of the day.
Expense neutral,
But-
not revenue neutral.
Well, the new revenues, but one of the problems that we have, that we've talked about on numerous times, it is difficult to attract and retain staff in general based upon what we pay. And when you have mission-critical jobs on part-time people, that is challenging as well. So this would enhance our ability to retain some critical staff at a closer to market rate.
okay. And, okay.
I agree.
That's- So obviously with the dollars that we get from the other, with the shared community, would obviously do some offset to the Worcester State retirement and all that stuff as well, correct?
It's close to expense
What's
neutral.
that?
It's an offset, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not like a revenue opportunity. We're
No,
not
no,
gonna
no,
make
no,
it.
but again,
It's a-
if it reduces our contribution to OPEB.
Well, I mean, it's
doesn't.
basically,
It doesn't.
it's not gonna,
That's,
No.
that's what I'm trying to, that's
you
what
know,
I'm
so
getting at.
they're not paying us more than it's costing us,
Mhm.
but it is with the state community compact grant and the way we can rearrange some things, it is expense neutral
I got that part.
while improving the pay, while increasing a part-time person to full-time, which improves, well, you know, I can't hire people.
I know,
Mhm.
not skilled people like that.
It's an excellent opportunity.
I can't
Okay.
hire them.
Gotcha.
So it improves our opportunity to retain or in the future attract folks.
Gotcha.
And I've been through the numbers countless times with you all in public and non-public session.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, thank you.
Happy to answer any
No,
questions from
you
the
answered my
advisory
question.
committee as well, if you'd like.
Do you guys have any questions?
Yep. All in favor of it?
Great. Do you guys have any questions?
I know this is first blush, and we'll have deeper conversations about it.
Okay.
Yeah, well, question and comment, as long as Kelly feels that she and her assistant can handle the increased workload without a detriment to the workload that's required of this town.
Right.
That's, that,
And I think with bringing Nicole on full-time and both of us, we would be able to do that.
you're the expert. Just
Okay.
sounds like a good
Okay.
idea.
Thank you, sir.
So with that, what I'd like to do next, thank you, Kelly.
Thank
Thank
you,
is
Ken.
you.
I'd like to, if this seems like a good order of things, I'd like to ask Adam to make his presentation that we promised you.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think that Diane's question about the officer, another override or other things, then we can get into other things that you might want to add to the budget,
Sure.
if that's an agreeable way to
Sounds good.
proceed.
Go ahead, Adam.
All set?
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the Board of Selectmen and Advisory Committee. I'm gonna pass down some information that I worked on, some projections or forecast, if you will. Okay, as you can see, I spent some time putting together, I'm gonna wait till everybody gets them actually, before I go. Continue. Yeah. Jeff, did you set some up? Okay, if you go to the first page, you can see these are the Town of Templeton revenue projections for a 5-year period. Spent quite a few hours working on this whole project, if you will. Come up with a quick and dirty idea, so when people think of where we're gonna be 5 years from now, you have some kind of idea. And I was actually kind of surprised looking at this myself, going through all the numbers. So if we could go to the second page. You can see the fiscal year 20 all the way through fiscal year 25. And the grand total at the bottom of page 2, above HCA cannabis.
I think it's important to note, we'll get you up the assumptions that were used in this. The biggest assumption used in this projection is a recession in fiscal '23. Not a hard recession. No recession is soft to the people that get unemployed.
And that's why you'll see some of those numbers that have been flat.
What you'll see in '23, numbers start to flatten out for a while. But that's important that you understand that assumption. Thank you, Adam.
Yep. So the grand total of the budgets, but as the select board has indicated an interest and other marijuana establishments have indicated an interest to come to Templeton, there is the HCA cannabis variable factor of revenue. But that is an independent variable to the revenues, and I'll get more to that as we proceed. So you see the numbers all right here. Let's move to page number 3, which is our expense projections on a 5-year basis. Now, these are our total expenses going through all the departments from selectmen all the way down to recreation and culture. We used about a 3%, public safety about a 5% growth in costs, if you will, or increase, I should say. Now, it's noted for insurance and benefits, which include retirement, because as many of you have seen in the budget book, retirement grows substantially at about a 10% increase. So with the weighted average, we used about a 7.5% increase for insurance and benefits on that number. Now for Monty Tech, our projections are based on a 2.5% increase. Now, keep in mind that number could fluctuate because that number went significantly down from the last fiscal year. And it knows if you get 20 more students, that number could shoot way up. So we just did a 2.5% increase. For the Narragansett Regional School District, we did our projections based on a 6% increase. Now, keep in mind, none of these numbers include the override for the schools or the officer. Now, but I want you to see at the bottom here, the full-time police officer cost for fiscal year 20 through 25. What we project will cost with the override revenues coming in. Now, I say we didn't use the override numbers because on the following page, it's not in those, but I want you to see the revenues, how you can see the difference, how it doesn't cover those costs. So these projections are based on rising retirement, insurance, step increases, and overtime cost. Now on the last page, this is where it's startling, to say the least. These are our 5-year projections. The blue line is our normal revenues. The orange line is our normal revenues and host community agreement money. And that gray line that you see passing over that orange line a little bit after fiscal year 21 is our expenses. The yellow line is our expenses with the full-time officer. And you could see that we can't sustain that cost. It's important for all of us budget makers to understand that. We're already gonna have a hard enough time to bring in more revenue, and we're working tirelessly under the direction of the select board to send out RFIs for marijuana establishments, to do all the work necessary to find any possible way to bring in more revenue.
So I want to say that this was a quick and dirty. We need to, under the financial management policy, every year produce a 5-year projection. It is important that over the coming 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, working with the advisory committee, we develop what are reasonable assumptions. So we took the benefits and we said, here's what's regular insurance, that normally goes up about 3. Here's the Worcester Regional Retirement, that's gonna go up about this. What was the weighted average of that in total? And some of these assumptions may be overly pessimistic. So this is a very quick and dirty snapshot. So we would work with you over the coming months, as I say, to agree a set of assumptions going forward and refining this model.
Does anybody have any questions on this? I mean, it's pretty much speaks for itself. I understand, you know, the importance of having full-time officers.
Doesn't look like we can sustain anything.
That
Not
is
without
my-
revenue coming into town, we can't.
That's the
That's the
challenge.
only,
here.
can't we
The
only
key
have
is you
one
can't
retail
say no.
establishment?
When the big companies wanna come into Templeton with the new housing and all the housing being sold right now, currently, you can't, as voters, sleep at night to say no to big company. If you don't want your taxes going up, the reality is, you have to say yes once in a while to big company. If you don't, I don't know what you're gonna do. 'Cause in 5 years, our revenue coming into Templeton isn't moving if you look at the blue line. So well done, Adam, but that, we've been saying that for a few years now. We've been trying to encourage people. They're knocking at your door. Don't turn them away, don't come up with excuses. You gotta let something in to bring revenue in, if you don't want your taxes to go up. And anyone else on the board can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's how I've strongly felt for a while now, and people have to understand the reality of it. You're looking at a brand-new school, lot of families coming in. If you don't bring the revenue into town, you can't have 2 full-time, whatever. And you can't have the officer, who's been since 2009, that is the only department that is still short 1 manpower. We've been able to look at everything and increase the other departments. It's time to increase them. However, if you look at this chart, it's reality. if you don't bring in the revenue in Templeton, you're not gonna get the services that we all, I think, want us to all have and maintain, is safety first. I think this board, in the last 4 years I've been strongly on it, has always said, safety first. It's time. I agree with Diane, I agree with everyone else that says, let's get them up to their manpower. We can't do that without bringing in revenue. We just, it's not gonna work. So I just hope that people understand that when it comes time to look at that.
So if I may, I'd like to comment on the revenue side of things. If the RFI, request for proposals on the sale of Baldwinville and the RFI on cannabis are successful, that is several $100,000 a year. Bear in mind that the host community agreement is 5 years and sunsets. But on the sale of Baldwinville, you're looking at 500,000 into the coffers, capital, let's say. But then tax revenues on the building, and the 20 jobs, the host community agreement. On the retail, you're only allowed one in a community of this size.
Yeah, that's what I thought, you're only allowed one.
One.
So,
But I'm very glad we got a proposal for one.
right.
You know,
As am I.
the community had sat back,
too.
and that's one way we came
Too
to
many
you and
times.
said, can we please send this letter out? So we need more economic development activities, and for anybody that's watching, please volunteer for the EDIC.
Thank you,
The
Carter.
big killer in here is the school number. We used a 6% increase, and let me tell you why. If their $21 million budget, $22 million budget, wherever they land, goes up 3% a year, that is $660,000, give or take. They're going to get 70,000 perhaps from the state in aid, which means we in Phillipston
pick up the
have to
slack.
split 600,000. These are just rough numbers. 600,000, we have to pick up 85% of that, which is around $510,000. So if their budget to us is 7 million, and we have to pick up 510, and that goes, that's why we used 6% for education. So the assumptions that we used are something we need to talk about over the coming months. These projections are only as good as the assumptions behind them. We want to perfect this model so that by the time we come back in 6, 7, 8 months, we have a model that at least everybody's agreed on the assumptions. But that's where we are.
And with that, is there anybody else have anything else to say?
No, thanks for bursting my bubble.
Sorry, Diane. But I mean, it's just important to note that without creating more revenue, and the expenses growing, you have to be able to. Now, I'm also gonna pass out the budget revisions.
No. Did you like it?
Now, most of them were minor changes. It didn't change the bottom line, but I wanted everybody to get a copy of all of them so that you can put them all in your budget book. We'll work to get it up electronically as soon as possible with all the changes. I know there's been a request made to get these. I was gonna get them all out after the conclusion of the budget hearing, but since there's an urgency, and Mr. Chairman, I caught up with me too, to make sure that this got out to everybody. And they're all right there, so just make sure you place them in your budget books. And that's that for now. Mr. Chairman?
Did you double check the columns, make sure they were tallying right?
Yes,
Okay,
everything's 100%.
okay.
And all the numbers are reflective. I think that was more of the question, was the accuracy of the numbers in the left column, even though the left column
Which
did not
never
affect,
changed.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, it hasn't impacted, but it's
No.
always good to catch things, and then after
Clean
we
it
get
up.
past next Wednesday, when you have approved a final warrant, a final budget, we'll go into the spreadsheet, make all the appropriate changes, get that off to the advisory committee, and get that reposted. As we will be reposting, posting the warrant and reposting the codification, and then we'll set another date to bring council out for another public meeting on the codification process.
Okay.
I just want to make some comments that I'm not going to make a motion about an override for the police department, but it is their job. It is their duty and their honor to serve and protect this community, and I believe it is our duty and our honor to serve them. And I am very disappointed that we can't do it.
Understood. It's well taken, Diane. I mean, we all, I think,
So I'm going to go home and cry now,
okay.
because that's the emotional part of me.
That's okay. You can, this is an
We-
emotional job.
We have the other alternative,
This is a job,
which is
'cause
not
we
an
don't get paid.
override, but which is to go at
Just
the
saying.
overlay, but it's sustaining either approach, is in the short term. And our projections could be off a little bit, because they have assumptions you might not agree with. We may have been over pessimistic on something. At quick glance, it does not look like we could sustain it.
Well, at quick glance, we're having trouble sustaining what we have right now,
Mhm.
so.
Agreed.
Jeff, did you get a chance to see that? Great. No?
I'm good.
Okay. You guys have any questions?
And once we get through this process and we have all these documents, we'll try to spend, offer to spend some time with the advisory committee, one-on-one, in case there are any questions.
Right.
We just haven't been able to carve out the time to do that, given the other tasks before us.
Well, obviously, if you guys have questions, just to reach out. Obviously reach out through your chair, and then you can reach out to us. Okay, Jeff? Okay. Anything else, Adam? You all set? Sorry, I missed half your presentation. Not feeling well.
I have to.
So with that, I guess the
Yep.
question becomes, do you want to vote on the ballot question tonight? Or do you want to just have us put it into the election ballot and you'll vote on everything next Wednesday? So we're doing it all together, and this does give you a few more days yet to reflect on things.
I vote the latter.
I second.
Okay, you wanna, okay.
Yep, that's all I need, if that's the consensus of
That's
the
fine.
board. We'll put the ballot question into
I didn't get an agenda.
the election ballot.
Thank you. Okay. The financial management policy, do you have that?
I don't know if are we ready to talk about that? I didn't have time to prepare a checklist,
Okay, let's put that off then, I guess.
and I'd like to
That's
put
a-
that off.
yep.
It should be partly a joint conversation with the advisory committee,
Okay,
but if we're able to spend some time with it, we may be able to shuttle information back and forth without requiring additional joint meetings.
all right, have you sent them a copy of that?
Yeah, they have it in the budget book.
Okay,
The part of the conversation that I was able to gain was, that the 7.75 should be the minimum. Certainly, we can amend the policy to say that the goal would be to set aside a minimum of the 0.75. So I'd like to be able to have some of that conversation one-on-one as
Okay.
opposed to,
Point of order.
point and counterpoint kinds of.
I understood,
John,
thank you.
really?
Yes,
Point of order, I
What's that?
can't hear him.
okay.
I'm sitting right next to him, but other conversations going on doesn't
I
help.
just asked a question.
Okay, I got it. All right, so we'll put that off. The hours, the annual training hours.
This is something I need to ask you to think about. We'll deal with it in the workshop, and I have to ask Holly to speak to the next workshop and schedule. We have occasionally throughout the course of the year needs for training. And at times, that actually requires that we close the building. Or we close offices, for instance, when we had the harassment training.
Right.
We have Mass OSHA, which took effect February 1. And what we would like to do is to have a conversation with you about your understanding and our understanding of, you know, I end up taking it upon myself to say, we're gonna have this training and I'm gonna close. I would feel a little more comfortable if I had an understanding of how many hours a year you're willing to allot to that effort where it requires full closures. And then I know the, you know, where the guardrails are. So, for instance, in another state, we had what was called a Joint Loss Management Committee, which was kind of a safety committee. And the policy called for them to provide 2 training sessions in a year consisting of no more than 4 hours. So I knew that I had 8 hours of training time in the year. It does take the staff, we have small staff, so I can't like say, okay, half of you can come now and half of you can come at another time when I only have 1 person in the office or I have 1.5 people kind of thing. So that's a conversation we'd like to have with you at the workshop. And when that workshop is and when those business meetings is, Holly?
We have a meeting scheduled for May 15th, the night of the annual town meeting. So I guess our options are to either just cancel that and have 1 business meeting, or to move everything up. We have a workshop on the 8th, we would move to the 1st. The 15th, we would move to the 8th. And then the meeting of the 29th, we would move to the 22nd, which would work out well with the election being on the 20th and having the reorganization meeting on the 22nd.
Or we could leave it the 29th on its regular scheduled date, just move the 1st.
So I just wanted to kind of. Are you all good with moving the meetings up a week?
The first 2?
Are you good, Dave?
Why can't we just leave the 29th in place?
Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting.
Leave it in place, and just move the other 2 up.
Yeah.
Move the first 2, the
Yeah.
15th and, what was the other
Move
one?
the 15th to the 8th as a business meeting and the 8th to the 1st as a workshop.
That sounds good.
All right, I'll do that.
And that also gives us some lead time to get ready for town meeting.
Right.
And I don't believe that conflicts because their pre-town meeting is May 2nd, tentatively?
Probably May 2nd, but.
Yeah, so that doesn't conflict with them, and it gives us, if they have any more questions, an opportunity to meet with you all on the 1st, so that I've already, as long as that, Jeff provided that date to me, Kelly and I are already on notice and planning to be there to answer questions, so we could also take additional information if need be.
That sounds good. You good with that, Diane? Julie?
Yep.
Sounds good, Holly.
On the potential for the override, you did adopt the statute that provides us to prepare a voter information guide. We've asked, and that's done by town council. So we reached out to him on what he thinks he needs to do that. I forget what he said, 3 to 5 hours or something. And we've reached out to Globe, our printing vendor, to see what they think it would take to print and mail that to all households that have a registered voter in them. And when we get that number, we may, Jeff, be approaching the advisory committee for a transfer, because that's nowhere in the budget. We didn't even know about this statute. So just quick heads up, we may be approaching you at one of your later April meetings for a transfer for that.
Okay.
And I think that's probably as much good news as we want to deliver in one evening, Mr. Chairman, unless there's
Yeah, this has been great.
some well, you know, we're just,
I mean, I hope that the people watching really understand, and if they have questions, they can reach out to the Board of Selectmen office as well. I mean, this is gonna be a huge step for the town going forward, and I hope that they can all see that and understand that. If they don't see it or understand it, then ask the questions.
And Tony hit a very important question, was if the override doesn't pass, it's not just about the school district cutting the 988. We're 85% of what they'd have to cut.
Right.
They would have to cut $1.2 million roughly.
That's correct. Okay. Advisory committee, have anything to sum up or add or communicate, or? It's been great having you guys here.
Fun time for all involved coming.
What's that?
Fun time for all.
Well, I just want to thank them personally, if I might.
Sure.
I think this has worked out well, and we may not agree on everything, but improving the communications, and hopefully this made for not a heavy lift. I know it's, you know, long day, long Saturdays and such, but on behalf of the staff, I would like to thank this board and the advisory committee for doing this as joint meetings and for engaging in conversations about, yes, you set policy for your board, but having some of their thoughts is useful to the staff.
Absolutely.
And I'd like to just thank both bodies.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you to the advisory committee. I appreciate you.
Thank you guys for allowing us to help contribute.
You have no idea how important it is. This is key.
I think they do.
And I think moving forward, obviously without myself or Doug in the seats in the near future, I think with the new people coming in, being elected, I think having that dialogue and communication, I think that should continue. Same with all the other implementations that have happened, and I think, Jeff, I think you will agree to that. Or not. We'll talk later. All right, well, with that being said, does anything else have anything to add for go to the committee and the board? See none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? I see none. Diane?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Jeff?
Motion to adjourn, so moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody mistaken? No. Good night, thank you.